Hey, I'm Sebastian, otherwise known as the Australian strength coach, and I'm standing here with two of the strongest athletes in the world, both from two different sports. This is Jesus Olivares, the first time I've met him, and damn, he just squatted 1,000 pounds. And I'm also the coach of Hafthor Julius Bjornsson, one of the world's best strongman athletes in our history. So today we're going to be talking about the deadlift, and these guys are two of the best guys to hear it from. So I think that I'm just as starstruck as I don't know if you guys are starstruck being in here. You guys obviously aren't standing next to these guys, but these guys are huge, they are strong, and two of the best guys to learn from. Obviously he's a powerlifter. They have to factor in a squat, which Jesus owns the world record for, which is hugely taxing. But then also the bench press, which is not as taxing, but definitely needs to be factored in, and that's something that I love to know about. How do you factor in all of the big lifts and factor in you need to get the best total possible, but also, of course, we want to get it through the so how would you train for your deadlift to do that?
So, I think, I guess the way that I'll start off my answer is I'm currently deadlifting 2 times a week, right? So, I was supposed to deadlift today after squats, but last week I actually tore my calluses on both hands. So just to make sure that my hands are healed for my primary deadlifts, which is normally on Thursday, right? So the way that we would essentially program and peak my deadlift going into a competition, right? So let's fast forward. We're 8 weeks out from Sheffield, January 26th, right? I don't do any SBP sessions, which is a really common theme that you see with powerlifters, especially lighter lifters, because you kind of have to fit in frequency, right? And I think a word that we're going to be using a lot today is frequency, because, I'm sure Thor has said there's times when he has to deadlift more than once a week. Well, I don't know, he pulls 1,000+ pounds. He might just do it once a week, right? So, since I do pull 900+, it's a very taxing load to do weekly, right? So, the way that my coach, Joey Flex, likes to do things, we use the RPE system, right? And what we like about the RPE system is it's completely subjective to how you're feeling on the day, right? But obviously, once you get to a certain time frame, you kind of have to push it a little bit if you need to, right? Just because you need to make sure your central nervous system is ready to handle those loads. And I think that is, in essence, the main thing that I need to make sure is prepared for meet day, right? Because let's go to Sheffield, right? Or I guess we can talk about Worlds. My most recent competition in Lithuania. It was my 4th world title, right? We called it on my 2nd squat because I was recovering from a hamstring injury, and going into deadlifts we knew that we needed to execute, right? So that's one way you can do it, is you can kind of set a cap on a load to make sure that, because the human body, when it's adjusted to training these kind of loads, when you're just in season, it you can hit an RP9, and as long as you don't hit that wall, you can recover pretty well as long as you're hydrating, you have food in between your lifts. So that's something that I'm taking charge of right now, right? So let's say I was competing, I just went for a squat world record. We're gonna make sure that it's the right call, that we're not gonna load more than we can bite off, right? Obviously, it's gonna be a load that I've never done before. It's a world record, and then going into bench, I need to make sure that I'm hydrating or eating, because bench is kind of, I don't want to discount it, but it's definitely where I get my legs back under me. Because after hitting 3 squats, 2 of them which are at least 1,000 pounds or more, going into bench, I'm on my heels. I got to make sure that I'm getting back on the saddle, I'm taking charge, and simply my body is engaged to do what I have to do, right? So we hit 3 benches. Now, deadlift, right? We're 2,000 pound squats in. We're hopefully bench 600+, and that's going to put us in a position to, get into a PR territory. You always want to set your PRs for competition day, so you make smart attempts. You kind of build into it. You're not just going to open up with your max. You're going to take something light, prepare your body for the next jump, and then you take whatever jump you're accustomed to. And then by that point, you're close enough to your PR or your all-time best that you can take a smart jump, a calculated decision, right? Where you want to max out what you have in the day, but you don't want to, as an athlete, you always want to walk out of every competition injury-free, right? Like, especially, and it's like, we're risking our bodies in training, even more so on competition day. So you want to make sure that you teeter in that line between pushing your absolute best, but making sure that you get to go home and, like, you know, you still bend over and have a functionally healthy life.
Something I noticed, correct me if I'm wrong, your all-time world record total is you pulled 900 pounds easily. Now, something I always say to people, it's like, you had so much more in the tank. And a lot of the times I say, you just got it right. And you just nailed the technique, everything is right. How much do you think you had more in the tank?
So my all-time best in the gym is 939 pounds, which is 426 kilos, right? And
but that's not a big squat, right?
No, that's like, so squat Monday, bench Tuesday, rest Wednesday, deadlift Thursday, right? So there's time in between for me to recover and eat. But in competition, what's always been my biggest limiting factor has been my grip, right? If my grip was unbreakable, I'm very confident that I could pull like 440 kilos on a Smith bar. But because I do have those issues, I have to take that into account and make sure that I'm listening on my second attempt, like, okay, like, did the bar roll? How does my grip feel? How, like, do I have 20 more kilos or do I really have 12 and a half? Right? Like, what is that point of limitation of what my grip can hold? Because in powerlifting, like, you have to make sure your knees are locked out, shoulders behind the bar, and you have to wait for the down command. And that's something similar in strongman, right? You gotta wait for the down command. So you gotta be able to hold it for at least a second or second and a half before you get that down command. So these are variables that I have to take into account, right? Like, I train grips maybe like 4 to 5 times a week, right? I like to watch videos from like Thor or a bunch of other strongmen, because that's something that they do great, is they train grip great, and I think a lot of powerlifters can benefit from that.
So now, 8 weeks out from Sheffield, how many times are you going to like 900 territory with the deadlift? Do you factor that in? Do you have to work after that and get close to?
So I think my strength is at a point where the closer I get to competition, like, the more frequent that I'm just gonna be stronger, right? I think it almost become necessary to pull within 5% of that on a minimum basis, just so I can have that confidence of I can grip it and I can hold it, right? Because if I'm in a situation where I need to go for an all-time PR, like 10 kilos more than I've ever pulled, that's kind of where that confidence comes into play, right? Because I know that within this range, my grip is willing to hold, right? Because my deadlifts have never really been a question of strength. It's always been, can I hold it? Right? How is my lockout going to hold it? So, I mean, that's really it.
Last question with this. 2 times a week deadlifting. You just said you only deadlift 1 heavy session every 2 weeks. Is that right?
It really depends, because I think something that I do great that a lot of people can learn from is how I manage my fatigue. Right? Like, today is a perfect example. I squatted 1,003 pounds. The bar was a lot whippier than I was anticipating. It took more than what I thought I had. So I literally just 50% on the volume set, right? And I take that same principle when I'm attacking heavy loads, right? How does my body feel? How is my back feeling? Like, my hips? Am I able to, like, let's say I hit 900 the week before and I'm supposed to go heavier the following week, right? Am I going to? Like, how am I feeling warming up? Or would it just be better to kind of do a little bit less, or maybe hit the same? Because I know I can hit the same without potentially risking something going wrong. So it's like, you kind of have to know yourself. You gotta be smart. It's not just about lifting big numbers. It's about lifting big numbers the right way, right?
I love that. So it's all based on being intuitive with your training.
Yes.
How you feel on the day. Right? Now this is, what style of periodization would you say that is?
I don't know. I feel like I'm a very unique individual, right? For obvious reasons. And I think I can get away with certain things just because my grip is deficient. It's deficient compared to my overall back strength. I'm never really pulling a max, So because I'm never pulling a max, because I can't hold on to it, it in itself kind of provides a security blanket where I know I'm kind of like operating within my limits, right? It's never really an RP 10. It's, did I lock it out, right? That's really the question that I'm having to answer every single deadlift session. So,
love all that. It's us standing here. So typically, Jesus, what RPE would you go to highest in the preparation for a competition?
Probably 9.
And how often would you do an RPE 9?
It's on a need basis, right? So probably my heaviest weeks always tend to be like a week before. Right? Just because, like a good example is my last heaviest squat before Sheffield was actually 475, which is 1,047 pounds. Like that, like I would not attempt that on a regular given day. Like the situation has to call for it, right? Because if something goes wrong, that's me on the line, right? So every decision has to be taken very seriously, because like this is like life altering weight that we're moving. So I mean, probably I would say that RP 9 for like maybe the last 4 weeks, right?
And before that, it's a bit easier.
Yeah, maybe before that, like try to cap it around 8. So just I think 8's a good middle ground. I forget where the percentage translates roughly to that. I mean, there's a sheet you can use, but I think 8.5 is a heavy but conservative. And you save those 9s for when you need it.
Love that. So the thing is with RPE, it's subjective. So obviously Jesus knows his body very well. He's the best in the world, and he's very good at gauging what those RPEs are. Something that I've learned with working with super strong guys is they don't go to fail in their training. It can be counterproductive, especially when you're lifting super huge weights like they're lifting. It could cause an injury really, really badly. Now this changes with beginner to intermediate. They could probably afford to train a little bit closer to a higher RPE through their training, because it's not as fatiguing and the risk of injury is not as high. So that's one style of training is and I believe it's quite advanced to be able to listen to your body and understand. If you get a beginner coming in saying, I'm going to go for an RPE 8 or 9 or whatever it might be, they might not know what that feels like. So in my opinion, I do think it's good to pair an RPE with the number as well, which is what I always like to try and do. Working with Hafthor, I can say we don't go to fail in training. So we just came we just spoke to Jesus and spoke to him about factoring in 3 lifts that he needs to do in a powerlifting competition. We just came from the strongest man on earth short classic with Hafthor. That's what he just competed in. Came first in the deadlift, as he always does. And I can tell you right now, we did not go to an RPE 10 at any point, and we didn't go to an RPE 10 in the competition either. We didn't have to, which was nice. Always nice. So let me ask you now, same questions. How many times a week do you deadlift?
Actually, I was shocked when he said twice a week. I've actually heard a lot of people saying that they deadlift maybe once a month or once every 2 weeks. When I tell people that I deadlift once a week, and I've done that consistently throughout my career, and I like that style, I love that style. Obviously, powerlifting versus strongness really different. And we train for potentially 20 different movements, Powerlifting is 3, so maybe they are able to get away with doing bench press, squats, and that more often in a week. Once a week we like to deadlift, and then usually 1 week light, another week heavy. That's how we've been doing it, and worked really well for us.
Worked well for us as someone who can deadlift as heavy as you. And with strongman, grip isn't the limiting factor. So this is something that we factor in here. You've got to keep your hands healthy, which we know as well, because there's grip events. There's grip events you need to keep your hands healthy for, but not quite the deadlift. So that's something that you don't really factor in with your training. But the numbers that you're lifting are closer to 1,000 pounds as you get closer to competition, and that's done. Actually, we only did that once before this, right?
Yes.
1,000 pounds. And that was about how many weeks out?
That was actually roughly, I think, a month out. And reason behind that was just because we felt like we want to put more focus on other lifts that we felt we needed to focus on. We knew that we were going to come in strong to the deadlift, and we knew we were going to, win it. At least we felt confident in that. So a month out, which in most cases we don't do a less heavy squat. Month out, I mean, on deadlift. In this case, we did, because we wanted to focus on the weaknesses.
So I think there's something that a lot of the world gets confused about. You are the owner of a 501 kilogram deadlift. And in this competition, we won the competition with a 450 kilogram deadlift. What's the difference between those two events?
Well, my 501 World Drag Deadlift is done with a suit and figure 8 straps. In this competition, it was a raw deadlift with normal straps. So basically, it makes a huge difference when you're not wearing a suit and when you're training for 8 events versus if you're just focusing on one event.
So with the 501 kilogram deadlift, there was one event that you trained for. And that's a huge difference with how strong he is. A lot of people, I've seen comments, which I probably shouldn't read, but I can't help myself, right? He's laughing because he knows all about it as well. But a lot of people say, I thought he could deadlift 501. Why is he only doing this much? There's so many factors. One, his 450 kilogram deadlift that he did in competition wasn't his absolute limit. But there's a strategy to go well or win the entire competition, and that's to save a little bit of energy because it's hugely taxing, and that was the first event of the day. So Hafthor did all it took to come first in that event, which he did. It was like 991 pounds for our Americans out there, and that was a great strategy, leaving a little bit of energy to focus on the other events. But it's factored in hugely in training. So with your 501, if you were to just train deadlift only, you're just competing deadlift only, do you think 1 month out is too long for the last 30 sessions for the deadlift?
Absolutely. We would usually, 10 days up to maybe 2 weeks maximum out, we do the last heavy deadlift session. Probably like close to like 10, 11 days out. We'll do the last heavy that's in a perfect role where we're just focusing on deadlift.
So that's hopefully a little bit of clarity between the differences with the two deadlifts. And now here's a little bit of a difference with the style of load selection. I love the idea of RPE, but I do know as a coach, a lot of people aren't as in tune with their bodies as high-level athletes like these guys. So if I told Jesus to work up to an RPE 9 or an 8.5, he'd know exactly what to do. Whereas something that I like to do when I'm coaching people is communicate with the individual. Tell them I'd like an RPE 8, and then I'd ask them how they felt about the lift, and then I'd calculate the number that they paired with that RPE, and then I'd say, good, now I know what the number is. So let's just say RPE 8, if you want to squat, what kind of number would that be? At the moment, at your level, you squatted 1,000 pounds down now.
So I think another variable that you can take into account, which you can kind of cherry pick from the conversation you guys just had, is like equipment you're using, right? So on that bar, I've never squatted 1,000 pounds on that bar. That bar felt like a regular commercial gym bar, which 9 times out of 10, I would probably not even go that heavy. So, but I mean, if I had my normal setup, competition style, I'm in stride, like I'm hitting high 9s, low 1000s consistently, like almost on a weekly basis. The fastest I've ever moved 1,000 is about an RPE, right? So I would look at what I hit the last week before. Like let's say so a good example is last week I hit 970, which is 440 kilos, right, at around a 7, RPE 7 to 8, right? Today I had an RPE 8, which those 15 kilos is such a relatively small jump that it's almost like there's no point in going lower than 440 for that RPE. So I'm like, might as well hit 1,000, right? So this is the 14th time I've ever squatted 1,000 pounds. So racking them up little by little, because it's what it takes.
That was the 14th time just now?
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I love that. And how many times in competition?
I think in competition, so the first time I hit 1,000 pounds was in Sheffield 23. I hit it on my second, and then I went up to 1,036 on my third, and then in Malta of 23, I hit 1,000 on my second. So that was number 3, and then I hit 1,000. So that was 3 in competition. So 5 times in competition. Yeah. Wait, no,
That's
6.
a
6 times in competition.
So I know that we haven't really done a match. Well, you've done a 1,000-pound squat once in your life.
In train.
That was no in the comp. Well, there was 460 kilograms.
Yeah, the 2 reps.
2 reps, unfortunately.
Up and down the 2 reps.
Right.
It was fast, guys.
Now, unfortunately, I wish, I'm a powerlifter as well, I wish that strongman had 1 rep max squats. I think you do great at that. I'd love to train you for that. But you do have 1 rep max deadlifts. Do you know how many times you've deadlifted 1,000 pounds?
I believe it's actually funny that for that. I think it's around that number actually.
I have,
Do you know?
I have a feeling it's about 19 times.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's too accurate of a number.
Yeah, well, I
It's
know.
definitely 19 times.
Yeah, you know, it could be 20 after this weekend because you didn't get the.
No, I didn't get those.
We got 991. We could have, but we didn't. Okay, so this is just crazy numbers. Something that I've just got to tell everyone that's watching. I know that none of you guys are as strong because these guys are the best. So a lot of these rules don't apply the same. When the stronger you get, the more recovery it takes between sessions. So I know with Thor, I don't want to speak on your behalf. Maybe you can tell me if it's different with you. But with Thor, we choose to deadlift heavy every second week because he's deadlifting so heavy. Even if it looks easy, his body still takes time to recover from that. But we still do deadlifts every week. But we go heavy session, light session, heavy session, light session. In my experience with beginner and intermediate athletes, we don't really need to play around with that yet. A lot of intermediate lifters and beneath that aren't strong enough for it to be that fatiguing. But the rules change as you get stronger. A few more questions for training at home. How many minutes rest do you have in between sets? When you're going to, your up the 8 and 9?
Right now, at the high end, 8 minutes. When I'm warming up, probably 5 minutes max.
Yeah.
Right, just because at the IPF level, the whole competition, you'll be done competing in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Right, so obviously, I think the one thing that does affect being a bigger guy is conditioning. So that's something that I kind of work in. Is I just time myself like, okay, like 3 minutes, 5 minutes. I really listen to my body. I'm very intentional with my breathing in between warm-ups and sets as well, right? Because realistically, in a competition, you don't pick how much rest time you want. Like everything is like on a roll, so you have to be able to
Be ready when they
be
call
ready.
you.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So I think warming up 5 minutes, and then maybe from my last warm-up to my top set, I try to limit it at 8 at the most because realistically that is the most time that I probably get in competition. So I try to replicate that as close to possible. If not, sometimes even faster, right? Because in Texas it's so hot that it doesn't really take long for me to get hot. Like it's just as soon as I step into the gym, I'm already sweating. Like my body is warming up as I'm filming my YouTube video. So it's like another variable you got to keep it to check.
I love that you said 8 minutes. Hafthor, how many minutes do you have rest in between your heavy sets?
Yeah, we actually go from 8 minutes up to you've got all the way up to 15 minutes maximum for like the heaviest sets. And then obviously as we start just with the anti-bar, we it's a lot less, but as we increase the weight it gets more and more and more. And then I'm a big fan as well to listen to the body, what you've been talking about a lot, you're a big believer in that, listen to the body and just feel how you feel, I'm the same way. If I feel good after 8 minutes, I'll go. If I feel like I need more rest, I'll rest a bit more.
Okay, a question that I know the answer to this, but a lot of people get very confused with this. 501 kilogram deadlift. What was the lift before, and how many minutes before that was it?
The lift before 501 was, I believe, 465.
Yep.
And we rested 15 minutes.
15 minutes. So a lot of people think, what's going to happen in 15 minutes? I'm going to cool down. At the highest level, he obviously didn't cool down. He needed that amount of rest, right? And actually he performed better with that amount of rest. But here's another fact. Beginners and intermediate taking 15 minutes rest, you are going to cool down. You need to be lifting the heavy enough weights to deserve that much rest in between sets and in between sessions. Another question for you guys. Let's talk about accessory lifts. Do you have a single favorite accessory lift you would like to include to help your deadlift?
So this is a really common question in powerlifting. People like to ask, what accessory is good for squat? What accessory is good for bench or deadlift? And in my honest opinion, I think the best thing you can do to deadlift is...
Now to the warm-ups. Hafthor, can you please show us a favorite way to warm up the deadlift?
That's simple, huh? Exactly that.
Exactly that. With that weight,
With that weight, potentially a bit more reps, but that's exactly how I warm.
so starting line on the exact movement, warming up the exact muscles we need to use for the deadlift with the exact movement that we're doing, starting light and gradually going heavier and heavier. So how many reps would you do on this?
I would do potentially up to 5 to 10 reps, depending on how I feel. I naturally get warm very fast. I've trained with a lot of different athletes throughout my career, and some of them like to warm for an hour before they even start the main exercise. I have throughout my whole career always warmed up with the exercise I'm doing. I might swing my hips a bit, might stress a little bit, but to be completely honest, in most cases, I just warm up with the things I'm going to do. So if I'm going to do deadlift, I just lift up the bar, 5-10 times.
So we've got one plate on the first set.
Yeah.
And then how big are your jumps?
I like to jump 50 kg, so one red plate each set.
And then what about how long between sets and how many reps have you got?
So with the first few sets, potentially few minutes up to a 5 minutes rest period, and then as you go heavier, you go up to 8, even more minutes.
How many reps?
As you get heavier, obviously it depends on what we're training for, It's a competition with a lot of reps,
Well, let's talk about what we did in the last competition.
Yeah, so we're training for a max deadlift. And in that case, we usually, train light once a week and heavy once a week. In that case, we would work ourselves up to a, heavy single.
So warm up number 1, let's say 5 to 10 reps on one plate. Warm up number 2, how many reps on 2 plates?
5 reps.
5 reps on 2 plates. Warm up number 3, 3 plates, how many reps?
1 rep, 4 reps, 2, 3.
1 or 2, 3,
Yeah.
4 reps.
1 rep.
1 rep, 5 reps.
1 rep.
1, 6 reps.
1.
7 reps. And keep going. 1, 1, 1. Okay, love that.
What might their jumps look like percentage-wise?
So 315 pounds we're talking, so that's like 3 plates. All right, now let's break it down because obviously I'm not as strong as you and no one else really is. So not many people will be able to jump up in increments that big. So let's just talk about, I think it's a pretty decent average gym goer, probably be able to deadlift 3 of these blue plates each side. I think that's pretty good. We think about the percentage. So with Thor jumping up 50 kilograms each side, let's just say they're able to do half what he can lift. They'd have incremental increases about half the size of his. So instead of jumping up 50 kilograms each side, let's jump up 20 or 25 kilograms. In fact, something I like to do, I call it pretty plates and round numbers. So if I'm doing a blue plates, I'll do a blue and then half of that. And then 2 blues and then another half. And then 3 blues and then another half. And just kind of keep it simple instead of changing plates around. And that's pretty much it. And then in terms of the rest between warm-up sets as well, Thor going up to 8 minutes, if you're not as strong as him, which unfortunately we're not, we can afford to have a little bit shorter rest between sets, between warm-up sets, and between top sets as well. So I think 8 minutes is great for these guys and even more. But a lot of beginner intermediate lifters, you know what, I'll even say with beginner lifters, it's quite a complex movement, and if I'm writing a program for a beginner, typically I'll say anywhere between 4 to 6 minutes rest. Usually if it's a beginner, maybe about closer to the 4-minute rest. A lot of people might consider that's a long period of time, but I say I like to spend more time recovering, so you got higher quality movement for a complex movement like a deadlift. And then when we do other exercises like machines that are less complex, then you can start playing around with 1 to 3 minute rest periods in between, because there's less room for error. And I think that the deadlift, we really need to pay attention. It's very complex. And as Jesus said, the best accessory exercise for doing it is just to refine the movement and do it better.
And then if you guys need water or break or anything, you just let us know. I know we're just going.
Let's talk technique and get a few tips from the greats. Hafthor, can you please give us 2 or 3 of your top tips for deadlift?
Let's just go over the basics, because I feel like a lot of beginners, they sometimes forget the basics, what's really important. And this might sound, silly to some people, but not to others, The first basics are just making sure that your foot placement is correct. Find and try to be on your feet, similar to with wrist, hip rest. Second, you want to make sure that you hold the bar in the same position. So here, when you bend down here, you want to make sure the bar is over the shoulder, not shoulder over the bar. So as I push my hips down, get into position, I pull the slack on the bar, then slack on the bar, and push, and then just slowly push up. This is a perfect deadlift. And you want to make sure the bar runs smoothly with the body.
Now, let's ask Jesus. Jesus, how do you like to warm up to the deadlift?
I feel like I kind of have to be a little different, because honestly, I'm very similar to Thor in terms of I maybe do. So this is something new, right? So something that we talked about earlier is me deadlifting twice a week. This is actually a new development. This is something we've added about 6 weeks ago. But I mean, the 4 to 5 years that I've been powerlifting before that, it's only been once a week. So this is more of like a technique deadlift day where I don't really focus so much on the load or the intensity, but more so the little nuances, the little specific details, right? Like how I grab the bar, how I set my feet up, and stuff like that. So I mean, I'll use a resistance band to essentially like warm up my hamstrings and my glutes and my quads, and like that's pretty much it. 30 seconds max, warm it up, and then I'm ready to go, right? This is something I picked up when I was rehabbing from my pulled hamstring like 2-3 months ago, and it's just something I feel it's important to continue using, right? So 30 seconds on the resistance band. I think you guys recorded some footage of me warming up. It's the same thing that I do for squats, for deadlifts. And then where I think I differentiate a little bit is I might not necessarily do a real deadlift with a plate. I'll more so do an RDL, right? I'm a Romanian deadlift where I'm just kind of working time over tension, which is, it's a warm-up, right? I'm not really, I know some powerlifters, like they like to like be super explosive, warming up from the bat, but for me, it's just so, more so like feeling the tension building my legs, right, in my back, when I pull the slack, when I set into position. Those are the things that I look for before I initiate pull, right? Which it might not look like that. To people from afar, it might just look like a grip and rip, like breathe, brace, grab the bar. But I promise you, like I'm at the point where mentally, every single little facet is something that I practice, and it's precise for me, right? So I think a really big tip for if you're like want to start pulling conventional, I think if you've done if you've done this movement before, it's called a broad jump, right? It's essentially a max jump for distance where you essentially want to engage force production from your toe all the way through your hip, right? When you're going for a broad jump, don't try to find that foot placement where you just feel the most explosive, right? So obviously I'm a bigger guy, my hips are a little wider, so my shins just end up having to be on a Merlin, which it sucks sometimes, but it is what it is. It's the name of the game. So this just happens to be where I feel I can get the most explosiveness in a broad jump, right? Because so here. I'm getting like a very good muscle activation all the way from my toe through my quads and my hips and my glutes, right? And I essentially, because the deadlift is a very explosive movement, you're trying to generate as much force as you possibly can from the ground up, right? So let's say I've already done my RDO warm up and we have a few more reps on the plate, right? So first thing I do when I sit up for a bar for deadlift is I set my feet where I want them because I have to make sure. So I pull mixed grip, right? So there's a few other different styles of grip that you can use, but I use mixed grip because that's just the most comfortable for me. And I have to make sure that my hands are gonna be like as close to my shins as possible without constricting the window of my body, right? You have to take these leverages into account, right? Because when you pull too narrow and you have a belly, that kind of limits your ability to like bend at the hips. Whereas when you go a little wider, now because I have a bigger gap in my groin, there's more room for me to work, right? And because my shoulders are so wide, I have to make sure that I can fully log out. And if they're too narrow, my shoulders are going to be over the bar, and that's going to be a bad lift. So when I'm setting up, these are all things that I'm taking into account, right? So for me, it's really just simple. I put either my index finger or in between index and ring on the knurling. Same thing on the other hand. And what I'm doing at this point is I'm pulling slack, right? I am producing force with my legs while simultaneously pulling with my upper back, right? And that's gonna set me up for my deadlift position where I generate as much pressure as I possibly can. And as you see, because the weight is so low, it's actually levitating before I even engage. At this point, I'm not even pulling. It's just my body doing it for me, right? And then, boom, give yourself a little bit.
Cool. So just a few top tips. I mean, you did speak a lot about lifting and saying, but I don't think the top tip you like doing recording. Yeah, okay. I know you just explained a bunch of your nice little techniques that you use, but are there any top tips that the viewers can take on immediately and help them with their deadlift?
Yes. Watch your film, study it, pay attention to head position, pay attention to your chest position in relation to the bar, and probably most important is your hips, right? Because you don't want to squat a deadlift, but you want to make sure your hips are in a position where you're activating those glutes, those hamstrings, and you're kind of hinging back, right? Because that's where you kind of get the pushing instead of the pulling, right? Because I think a deadlift is really a push-pull mechanism or a lift because you're generating pulling power while you're kind of pushing through your hips, right? So if you can kind of incorporate those principles into your head, try to really get in tune with your body. Like really feel your toes on the ground, feel your quads, feel your back, feel your forearms. Try to be as in tune as you possibly can. And like that's when you start to kind of break limitations. That's when you start to really push past what you think you're capable of, because now you're like your mind and your body are on the same page. If your body is ready to do something, but your mind is nowhere near where it needs to be, you're gonna have an internal conflict that you're not gonna be at your best. So I think just slow it down while you warm it up. That's why warm-ups are warm-ups. Take your time. Find those cues, those positionings that are just going to improve deadlift or anything really. Like any pressure you feel to perform, it's all up here. Put it aside. Take your time, breathe through it, and try to really find what works best for you.
So that is some of the best deadlifting tips that you will ever find coming from the strongest athletes on the planet. We spoke about rest, we spoke about recovery, we spoke about frequency and programming, as well as some of their favorite deadlift techniques. And if you're going to listen to anyone about the deadlift, it's got to be these guys.
Perfect.